The crystal chandelier above the dining table cast fractured light across my mother's disapproving face. I kept my eyes on my plate, pushing roasted vegetables around with my fork, while conversation swirled around me like I wasn't even there. 26 years of being invisible had taught me the art of fading into expensive wallpaper. "Natalia, darling, you simply must try the caviar Roman sent over," my mother Svetlana gushed, her manicured fingers gesturing toward the obscenely expensive appetizer. "It's from his private reserve. Can you imagine? A private reserve of caviar. That's the kind of man you're marrying." My older sister smiled with practiced grace, the kind of smile that had been winning her admirers since she was 15. At 29, Natalia Volkov was everything our parents had ever wanted in a daughter. Beautiful in that classical, untouchable way, poised, ambitious, and now engaged to Roman Fedorov, heir to one of the most powerful families in the city. "Roman is very generous," Natalia replied, her voice carrying that breathy quality she adopted whenever discussing her fiancé. "He wants only the best for our family. Our family. As if the Fedorov wealth and influence would somehow trickle down to me, the forgettable younger daughter who worked as a museum archivist and lived in a modest apartment across town. The daughter who was only invited to these family dinners because absence would look suspicious. "Polina, sit up straight," my father Oleg barked without looking at me. "You're slouching again. How do you expect to find a husband with posture like that?" I straightened automatically, years of conditioning overriding my desire to point out that I wasn't actually looking for a husband. Especially not one like Roman Fedorov, whose steel-gray eyes seemed to catalog everyone's worth in a single glance, whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded him into every room. "Leave her alone, Papa," Natalia said with the kind of casual dismissiveness that stung more than outright cruelty. "Polina isn't interested in marriage. She's married to her dusty old books and forgotten artifacts, aren't you, little sister?" The patronizing tone made my jaw clench, but I forced a neutral expression. "The museum keeps me busy, yes." "How quaint," my mother murmured, already losing interest. Her attention returned to Natalia. "Now, about the seating arrangements for the engagement party next week. I was thinking." I tuned out, letting their voices become background noise. The engagement party would be another exercise in my invisibility. I would be expected to attend, to smile, to fade into the background while Natalia and Roman held court. I'd done it at the announcement dinner, at the family introduction, at every event since Natalia had landed the catch of the century 6 months ago. The doorbell chimed, its melodious tone cutting through the dinner conversation. Our housekeeper, Marina, appeared moments later, her usually composed face slightly flustered. "Mr. Fedorov is here," she announced, and I could have sworn I detected a note of nervousness in her voice. "He asked to speak with the family." My mother's face lit up like she'd just won the lottery. "Roman. How wonderful." Marina set another place immediately. "That won't be necessary," a deep voice said from the doorway, and everyone turned. Roman Fedorov stood in the entrance to our dining room, and despite having seen him multiple times over the past 6 months, I still felt that involuntary tension that seemed to affect everyone in his presence. At 34, he carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from knowing he could destroy lives with a phone call. He was tall, broad-shouldered in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, with dark hair styled back from a face that was all sharp angles and cold perfection. But it was his eyes that unsettled people. Storm gray and penetrating, like he could see through every lie, every pretense, every carefully constructed facade. "Roman, darling." Natalia rose gracefully, moving to kiss his cheek. What a lovely surprise. We were just discussing the engagement party. "Sit down, Natalia," he said, his tone gentle but firm. She blinked, caught off guard by the command, but complied. Roman's gaze swept the table, landing briefly on me before moving to my parents. "I apologize for the interruption," but I have something important to discuss with the family. My father puffed up with self-importance. Of course, of course. Anything for our future son-in-law. Please, sit, have some wine. I'll stand. Roman's voice cut through my father's bluster with surgical precision. This won't take long. Something in his tone made unease curl in my stomach. I watched as he pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, setting it on the table with deliberate care. I'm calling off the engagement, he said simply, as if announcing the weather rather than detonating a bomb in the middle of our family dinner. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. Natalia's perfect composure cracked, her face going pale. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red. You're... what? Natalia's voice came out in a strangled whisper. The engagement is over, Roman repeated, his expression unchanged. I've had my lawyers draft the necessary documents. You'll find everything in order. I'm not contesting the return of the ring, and I've included compensation for any wedding expenses already incurred. Compensation? My father rose from his chair, his hands flat on the table. You think you can just waltz in here and humiliate my daughter with a payoff? I think, Roman said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, that ending this now is better than continuing a union that would benefit neither of us. Natalia is a remarkable woman. She deserves someone who can give her the attention and devotion she requires. It was a polite way of saying he didn't love her, had never loved her. I risked a glance at my sister, whose shock was giving way to fury. 2 weeks before the wedding, she hissed, her practiced composure finally shattering. You're doing this 2 weeks before the wedding? Better 2 weeks than 2 years, Roman replied calmly. Or 20. My mother found her voice, shrill with panic. But the invitations have been sent. The venue is booked. What will people say? They'll say I made a business decision. Roman's gaze shifted, and I felt the weight of his attention land on me like a physical thing. Which brings me to the second reason I'm here. My heart stuttered. Why was he looking at me? Polina. The way he said my name, deliberate and clear, made everyone at the table turn to stare at me. I'd like to speak with you privately. What? The word escaped before I could stop it. Why? Polina has nothing to do with this, my father blustered. Protective instinct finally kicking in now that it was too late to matter. Leave her out of whatever game you're playing. This isn't a game, Roman said, still looking at me. Polina, please, 5 minutes of your time. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to stay in my safe, invisible corner where Roman Fedorov's attention couldn't reach me. But something in his expression, not quite vulnerability, but close to it, made me push back from the table. 5 minutes, I agreed, my voice steadier than I felt. I led him to my father's study, acutely aware of 3 sets of eyes boring into my back as we left. Once inside, I closed the door and turned to face him, crossing my arms defensively. I don't understand what you want from me. Roman moved to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens beyond. Do you remember the charity gala 3 months ago? The one where you accompanied your family? I frowned, trying to recall. Vaguely. I spent most of the evening in the library avoiding conversation. I know. His lips curved slightly. I found you there. You were examining a first edition Tolstoy, completely absorbed. When I asked what you thought of the party, you said, and I quote, "It's a room full of people performing wealth and power, like it's a talent rather than an accident of birth." Heat crept up my neck. I'd forgotten that brief conversation, had assumed he'd forgotten it too. I didn't realize you were. I shouldn't have been so blunt. Why not? You were right. He turned from the window to face me. That was the first honest thing anyone had said to me in months, maybe years. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Roman studied me with those unsettling gray eyes. Your sister is beautiful, accomplished, everything a man in my position should want. But she looks at me the way everyone else does, like I'm a title and a bank account rather than a person. And that surprises you? I couldn't help the edge in my voice. You chose her precisely because she fit the role. Trophy wife for a powerful man. I did, he admitted without shame. It was a calculated decision. Natalia's family connections, her social standing, her willingness to play the part. It all made sense on paper. Then why call it off? Because 3 months ago, I met someone who called a room full of the city's elite performers. Someone who didn't simper or flatter or treat me like I was doing her a favor by breathing the same air. His gaze intensified. Someone who saw through the performance to the truth underneath. My breath caught. Roman. I have a proposition for you, Polina. He pulled another envelope from his jacket, setting it on my father's desk. A contract marriage, 2 years. You would be my wife in name, help me maintain certain business alliances that require a stable family image, attend necessary social functions. In exchange, you'd have complete financial security, freedom to pursue your work, and at the end of 2 years, a settlement that would make you independently wealthy. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. You're insane. I'm practical. He gestured to the envelope. Read it. My lawyers have outlined everything. Separate bedrooms, no expectations of intimacy, complete discretion. You'd be free to live your life however you choose, as long as you appear as my wife when necessary. Why me? The question burst out. Why not any of a dozen women who would actually want this? Who want you? Because they want Roman Fedorov, heir and enforcer. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. You're the only person who's ever looked at me and seen just Roman. The man, not the myth. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Wanted to throw the envelope back in his face and tell him to leave. But a traitorous part of me whispered that this was a way out. Out from under my parents' dismissal. Out from Natalia's shadow. Out of a life where I would always be invisible. I need to think about it, I said finally. Roman nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. You have 48 hours. After that, I'll need an answer. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Polina, I think you underestimate your own value. You've spent so long being overlooked that you've started to believe you deserve it. After he left, I stood alone in my father's study, staring at the envelope on the desk. From the dining room, I could hear raised voices, my mother's hysteria, Natalia's fury, my father's blustering outrage. I picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Inside was either my liberation or my destruction. Perhaps both. The choice, for once, was entirely mine. I didn't return to the dining room after Roman left. Instead, I slipped out through the garden entrance, clutching the envelope against my chest like a shield as I walked the 12 blocks to my apartment in the cooling evening air. My phone buzzed incessantly. My mother, my father, Natalia, but I silenced it without reading their messages. My studio apartment was modest. A converted loft above an antique bookstore that smelled perpetually of old paper and dust. It was mine, paid for with my own salary, decorated with my own choices. For the first time since Roman had dropped his bombshell proposal, I could breathe. I made tea with shaking hands and settled onto my worn couch, finally opening the envelope. The contract was professionally drafted, dense with legal language that I struggled to parse. But the essential terms were clear enough. A marriage in name only, duration of 2 years. I would receive a monthly allowance of $50,000, more money than I currently made in a year. I would maintain a separate bedroom in Roman's penthouse. I would attend required social and business functions as his wife. In exchange, at the end of 2 years, I would receive a settlement of $5 million and complete freedom to pursue any life I chose. There were clauses about discretion, about public behavior, about the handling of personal matters. But nowhere in the document did I see requirements for affection, for intimacy, for anything resembling an actual marriage. It was a business transaction. Clean, clear, transactional. The question was whether I was willing to sell 2 years of my life for freedom. My phone rang again. This time it was Elena, my closest friend from university, and the one person who knew how suffocating my family could be. "Please tell me the rumors aren't true," she said, without preamble. "Please tell me Roman Fedorov didn't actually dump your sister at a family dinner." He did. I carried my tea to the window, looking out at the street below. It was spectacular. Holy shit. Elena paused. "Are you okay? I know you and Natalia aren't close, but still." He asked me to marry him instead. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, "I'm sorry, what?" I explained the contract, the proposal, the impossible choice I was facing. Elena listened without interrupting, which was how I knew she understood the gravity of the situation. "So, let me get this straight," she said finally. "Roman Fedorov, the Roman Fedorov, wants to marry you. Not your perfect sister, but you, in a 2-year business arrangement that would make you independently wealthy. That's the summary, yes. And you're considering saying no because it's insane?" I suggested. "Because he's dangerous? Because marrying into that world, even temporarily, could destroy me?" "Or," Elena countered, "it could free you. Polina, you've been living in Natalia's shadow your whole life. Your parents treat you like an afterthought. You're brilliant and talented, and you're wasting away in a job that doesn't appreciate you, in a family that doesn't see you. This is your chance to step into the light. By binding myself to a man who could end me with a phone call? By binding yourself to a man who, apparently, is the only person who's ever really seen you." Elena's voice softened. "I've known you for 8 years. I've watched you make yourself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into spaces your family carved out for you. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Something bold and terrifying and completely outside their expectations?" I didn't have an answer for that. 48 hours, Elena said. "Sleep on it. But Polina, don't let fear make this decision for you. You've been afraid of being seen your whole life. Maybe it's time to find out what happens when someone actually looks." After we hung up, I pulled out my laptop and did what I should have done months ago when Natalia first announced her engagement. I researched Roman Fedorov. The official story was easy to find. Heir to the Fedorov family business empire, which had tentacles in real estate, import, export, and various industries that operated in the gray areas of legality. He'd taken over operations from his father 5 years ago and had consolidated power with ruthless efficiency. He was known for being calculating, strategic, and absolutely merciless to anyone who crossed him. But there were other details too, if you looked carefully. Donations to children's hospitals, always anonymous but traceable through public records. A youth literacy program funded entirely by Fedorov money. A network of safe houses for women fleeing dangerous situations, operated through shell corporations that led back to his holdings. Roman Fedorov was a contradiction, a man who could ruin lives without hesitation, who also quietly saved them when no one was watching. I thought about what he'd said, about me seeing him rather than his title, about being the first person in months, maybe years, to be honest with him. And I thought about what Elena had said, about stepping into the light after a lifetime of shadows. The decision crystallized with sudden clarity. I had 48 hours, but I already knew my answer. The next morning, I called Roman's private number, which he'd included in the contract documents. He answered on the first ring. "Polina." "I'll do it," I said before I could second-guess myself. I'll marry you, but I have conditions. A pause. Then, I'm listening. I want continued employment at the museum. I'm not giving up my work, contract marriage or not. Agreed. I want my own space within whatever living arrangement we have. Not just a separate bedroom, but actual privacy. The penthouse has an entire wing that would be yours. I'll have it furnished to your specifications. And I wanted in writing that at the end of 2 years, we part ways cleanly. No strings, no obligations, no attempts to extend the arrangement. That was always the intention. His voice carried something that might have been satisfaction. Anything else? Yes. I took a breath. I want to know why, the real reason. Not the business explanation, not the strategic rationale. Why me, Roman? The silence this time was longer, weighted with consideration. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, almost vulnerable. Because when you looked at me in that library, you didn't see a monster or a meal ticket or a stepping stone to power. You saw a man at a party who was as tired of performing as you were. And for 5 minutes, I could stop being Roman Fedorov and just be someone having a conversation about Tolstoy with someone who actually read Tolstoy for pleasure, not status. My throat tightened. That's a pretty thin foundation for a marriage, even a fake one. Is it? He exhaled softly. I've spent 15 years building an empire on foundations of fear and calculation. Maybe it's time to try something different, even if it's just for 2 years. When do we start? I'll have Kirill, my lawyer, send over the final documents today. We can sign tomorrow, announce the engagement next week, marry within the month. He paused. I know this is fast. Fast is good, I interrupted. It means less time for second thoughts. Yours or mine? Both. His laugh was unexpected, genuine. Fair enough. Paulina, thank you for taking the risk. After I hung up, I stood in my apartment, looking around at my small, safe life. In a few weeks, none of this would exist. I would be Polina Fedorova, wife to one of the most dangerous men in the city. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something strange and unfamiliar unfurling in my chest. It felt like possibility. The scandal, when it broke, was even more spectacular than I'd anticipated. Within hours of Roman's announcement, delivered via his publicist with clinical precision, social media exploded. Natalia Volkov's name trended alongside Roman Fedorov's, with speculation ranging from infidelity to secret scandals to business betrayals. And then came the second announcement, delivered just as the first was reaching fever pitch. Roman Fedorov was engaged to Polina Volkov, younger sister of his former fiancé. The internet, as Elena would say, lost its collective mind. I avoided all media for the first 24 hours, but I couldn't avoid my family. They descended on my apartment like a plague, my mother leading the charge with Natalia close behind, and my father bringing up the rear with his outraged bluster. How dare you? My mother hissed the moment I opened the door. How dare you steal your sister's fiancé? I didn't steal anyone, I said, blocking their entry to my apartment. Roman made his own choices. Choices? Natalia's perfect composure was gone, replaced by raw fury. You went behind my back, seduced him, undermined me. I had one conversation with him, I interrupted, 3 months ago, about Tolstoy. That's it. And that was enough for him to throw me over? Natalia's laugh was bitter. What did you do, Polina? What lies did you tell him about me? I told him nothing about you because we didn't discuss you. I felt my own anger rising, years of dismissal and condescension finally finding an outlet. Has it occurred to you that maybe Roman wanted someone who saw him as more than a wallet and a status symbol? My mother gasped. How dare you speak to your sister that way? How dare I? The words burst out before I could stop them. How dare you? All of you. You've treated me like furniture for 26 years. I was good enough to round out family photos, but not good enough to be taken seriously. And now that someone actually sees me, actually chose me, you're offended? We're your family, my father said, his voice tight. You're related to me, I corrected. That's not the same thing. If you do this, Natalia said, her voice cold, if you marry him, you're dead to me, to all of us. I looked at each of them in turn. My mother's scandalized fury, my father's patriarchal outrage, my sister's wounded pride. And I felt nothing. No guilt, no fear, no desperate need for their approval, just exhaustion. Then I guess I'm dead to you, I said quietly, because I'm marrying him. I closed the door on their protests, locked it, and slid down to sit on the floor with my back against the wood. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From relief. My phone buzzed. A text from Roman. I'm hearing reports of a family confrontation. Are you all right? I stared at the message, this small gesture of concern from a man I barely knew, and typed back, I'm fine. Just burned some bridges. His response came quickly. Good. Those bridges were rotten anyway. Despite everything, I smiled. The wedding happened 32 days after Roman had walked into my family's dining room and detonated my life. It was small by Fedorov standards, just immediate family and close associates, held in a private garden that probably cost more than most people's houses. I wore a dress that Roman's stylist had selected, ivory silk that moved like water, and made me feel like someone else entirely. Someone confident. Someone chosen. Roman wore a dark suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, his expression composed as he waited for me at the altar. But when I reached him, when he lifted my veil and his gray eyes met mine, I saw something flicker in their depths. Recognition. Relief. Maybe even gratitude. You look beautiful, he murmured, quiet enough that only I could hear. You look terrified, I whispered back. His lips curved slightly. Perceptive as always. The ceremony was brief, efficient. We exchanged vows we didn't mean and rings that symbolized a contract rather than commitment. When the officiant pronounced us married, Roman's kiss was chaste, appropriate, completely without passion. It felt like a business merger being sealed with a handshake. And yet, when he took my hand to lead me back down the aisle, his grip was warm, solid, real. 2 years, he said under his breath. 2 years, I agreed. Neither of us mentioned that 2 years suddenly felt both impossibly long and terrifyingly short. The reception was held in the ballroom of Roman's, our, penthouse, a space so opulent it made my parents' house look modest. I smiled through introductions to Roman's business associates, men with hard eyes and expensive suits who studied me like they were trying to calculate my worth. I met Kirill, Roman's lawyer, and apparently his closest friend, a lean man with sharp features and sharper intelligence, who shook my hand with genuine warmth. So you're the woman who made Roman cancel a society wedding with 2 weeks' notice, he said. I like you already. I'm not sure I did anything except exist, I replied. Sometimes that's enough. Kirill glanced at Roman, who was across the room in conversation with an older man I didn't recognize. He's been different since he met you. More human. Is that good or bad in your business? Depends on who you ask. Kirill's smile was cryptic. But I think it's good. Someone needs to remind him there's more to life than power and strategy. As the evening wore on, I found myself studying my new husband from across the room. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, commanding attention without trying, radiating the kind of power that made people instinctively defer to him. But every so often, his gaze would find mine across the crowded room, and something in his expression would soften almost imperceptibly, like he was checking to make sure I was still there, still real. When the last guest finally left, and we were alone in the suddenly silent penthouse, Roman loosened his tie and turned to me. "Your wing is through there," he said, gesturing to the left side of the penthouse. "Mine is opposite. Everything's been set up according to your specifications. Kirill worked with the decorator to match your preferences." "Thank you." I hesitated. "This is strange, isn't it? Being married to someone you barely know?" "Strange," he agreed, "but not unwelcome." He moved closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "Polina, I know this isn't a real marriage. I know you agreed for your own reasons, and I respect that. But I want you to know, you're safe here. From me, from anyone." "That's a promise." I believed him. "And you're safe from me too. From judgment, from expectations, from having to perform." Something shifted in his expression, a kind of relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. "Thank you." We stood there in the quiet penthouse, two strangers who had just promised each other 2 years of their lives, and I thought maybe Elena had been right. Maybe it was time to find out what happened when someone actually looked. The first month of married life established a rhythm that was both stranger and more comfortable than I'd anticipated. Roman kept to his side of the penthouse, I kept to mine, and we intersected mainly during the required public appearances that maintained the fiction of our marriage. But gradually, unconsciously, we began to orbit closer. It started with breakfast. Roman was an early riser, already dressed in his perfectly tailored suits by 6 a.m., reviewing documents over coffee in the penthouse's sprawling kitchen. I wasn't a morning person by nature, but the museum opened at 9, which meant I wandered into the kitchen around 7. The first morning I found him there, I'd frozen in the doorway, suddenly conscious of my sleep-rumpled appearance and ratty museum t-shirt. But he'd simply gestured to the coffee maker and returned to his reading, granting me the gift of being unremarkable. After a week, it became routine. I would make my coffee. He would finish his review of whatever crisis required his attention, and we would share the space in comfortable silence. Sometimes I brought a book. Sometimes he took phone calls in rapid Russian that I pretended not to understand. It was peaceful in a way I'd never experienced with another person. The shift happened on a rainy Wednesday, 3 weeks into our arrangement. I'd stayed up late cataloging a new acquisition at the museum, a collection of letters from the 1890s that I found fascinating, but probably no one else would ever read. I stumbled into the kitchen at 7:30, bleary-eyed and running late, to find Roman assembling something at the counter. "You look exhausted," he observed without judgment. "Late night with a countess's correspondence?" I mumbled, making a beeline for the coffee. "Have you eaten?" I paused, trying to remember. I had. Something. Yesterday, maybe? He made a disapproving sound and slid a plate across the counter toward me. Scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit arranged with surprising care. "Eat. You can't function on caffeine and absent-mindedness." I stared at the plate, then at him. "You made me breakfast." "I made breakfast. You happened to be here." But there was a hint of color along his cheekbones that suggested the distinction mattered less than he wanted to admit. I sat, taking a bite of eggs that were better than they had any right to be. "Where did you learn to cook?" "My mother." His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "She insisted that self-sufficiency was more important than staff, said powerful men who couldn't feed themselves were just children in expensive suits." "She sounds wise." She was. The past tense hung in the air between us. She died when I was 17. Car accident. "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, but his slight nod suggested they were enough. "Your turn," he said, refilling his coffee. "Tell me something real about Polina Volkov. Or Fedorova, I suppose." The question caught me off guard. "What do you want to know?" Anything that isn't in the background check my security team compiled. His gray eyes met mine with unexpected directness. Start with why you work at a museum when you have a degree in art history and could be doing something more lucrative. You had me investigated? Of course. I don't enter into contracts blind. Even marriage contracts. He didn't sound apologetic. The file said you graduated top of your class, turned down positions at major auction houses, and chose a modest archival position instead. Why? I considered deflecting, but something about the quiet morning and his genuine curiosity made me answer honestly. Because I don't want to sell history. I want to preserve it, understand it, give it context. The people whose letters I catalog, whose possessions I document, they're not commodities. They're voices from the past, trying to be heard. Roman was quiet for a long moment, studying me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see straight through pretense. You're a romantic. Is that a criticism? No. His voice was soft. It's refreshing. Most people in my world see everything as a transaction. It's rare to meet someone who believes some things have value beyond their price tag. Says the man who married me via contract. His lips curved slightly. Point taken. But you agreed to the contract, which makes you practical as well as romantic. A useful combination. We fell into silence, but it was comfortable rather than awkward. I finished my breakfast, surprised by how hungry I'd actually been, and checked my watch. I should go. Can't be late for the Countess's correspondence. Polina. He stopped me as I was rinsing my plate. Thank you. For what? For this. The breakfast, the conversation, the illusion of normalcy. His expression was carefully neutral, but something vulnerable lurked behind his eyes. It's been a long time since I had either. I set down the plate, turning to face him fully. You know we don't have to wait for scheduled public appearances to interact, right? We live together. We can talk whenever we want. Can we? The question was genuine, uncertain. I don't want to intrude on your space. That was part of our agreement. Privacy. Separation. The agreement said separate bedrooms, not separate lives. I surprised myself with the assertion. I'm not saying we need to be best friends, Roman. But if we're going to do this for 2 years, maybe we could at least be friendly strangers instead of polite ones. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the carefully maintained armor. I'd like that. Our friendship, if that's what it was, deepened gradually, naturally, like water finding its level. Roman started leaving books on the kitchen counter, history texts and philosophical treatises that he thought I'd enjoy. I started making dinner occasionally, discovering that cooking for 2 was more pleasant than cooking for 1. We developed a pattern of evening conversations on the penthouse terrace, overlooking the city lights. Roman would pour wine, good wine, the kind that probably cost more than my former monthly rent. And we would talk about everything except the obvious. That we were 2 people playing house in a mansion, pretending at a marriage that was scheduled to end. 4 months into our arrangement, Roman came home from a business trip to Moscow, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. His suit was rumpled, there were shadows under his eyes, and when he sank onto the terrace sofa beside me, he didn't bother with his usual composure. Bad trip? I asked, setting aside my book. Complicated. He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its usual perfect style. A business partner decided to test my patience. I had to remind him why that's not advisable. I knew better than to ask for details about his business, knew the contract explicitly kept me separate from that world. But something in his voice, a weariness beyond just physical exhaustion, made me ask anyway. Did you hurt him? The partner? Roman's gaze snapped to mine, surprised by the direct question. Would you think less of me if I said yes? I considered this, really considered it. I think I'd think less of you if you lied about it. A long pause. Then, I ruined him financially. Publicly, legally, in ways he won't recover from. But I didn't touch him physically, if that's what you're asking. I don't enjoy violence. Polina, I use it when necessary, but I don't enjoy it. That's something, I suppose. Is it enough? For you? The vulnerability in his voice was startling. To know that the man you're bound to for 2 years is capable of destroying lives when it serves his purposes? I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the exhaustion etched into the lines of his face, the weight of power and expectation pressing down on shoulders that carried it without complaint, the loneliness of a man who couldn't trust anyone enough to show weakness. I think, I said slowly, that you're more than the worst thing you've ever done. Just like I'm more than the invisible daughter my family never saw. I reached out, surprising myself, and took his hand. We're all complicated, Roman. Maybe that's why this works, because we see each other's complications and don't run away. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid. I'm glad I found you in that library. I'm glad you were arrogant enough to think I'd agree to this insane arrangement. His laugh was unexpected, genuine. Arrogant? Supremely. I squeezed his hand. But it's growing on me. We sat like that as the city lights flickered to life below us. 2 people who had entered a contract for practical reasons and were discovering something entirely impractical in the margins. 6 months into our marriage, we attended a charity gala, the kind of event that required my performance as Roman's devoted wife. I wore a deep green gown that his stylist had selected, my hair styled in an elaborate updo that I would immediately destroy the moment we got home. Roman appeared in my doorway as I was struggling with an earring, looking devastating in a black tuxedo that emphasized his powerful frame. Need help? Unless you have magic fingers that can manage clasps, I don't think so. He crossed to me, gently turning me around. His fingers brushed my neck as he fastened the earring, his touch surprisingly gentle for such a dangerous man. In the mirror, our eyes met. You look beautiful, he said quietly. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else. Perceptive as always. His hands lingered on my shoulders. I hate these events. All performance, no substance. Then why go? Because appearance matters in my world. Because powerful men who don't show their faces get speculation about weakness. He met my gaze in the mirror. Because my wife needs to be seen at my side, maintaining the illusion that this is a real marriage. The word illusion stung more than it should have. Right, the contract. Something flickered in his eyes. Polina. We should go, I interrupted, not ready to examine why his reminder of our arrangement's temporary nature bothered me. Wouldn't want to be late to the performance. The gala was exactly as tedious as I'd anticipated. Roman was pulled into conversations with business associates and city officials, always keeping me at his side but rarely including me in the discussions. I smiled and nodded and played the role of the decorative wife, hating every minute, until Maxim Volkov appeared. I didn't recognize him at first. He was older than in the photos I'd seen, his once handsome face hardened by time and cruelty. But when he approached Roman with a predatory smile, I felt my husband's entire body tense beside me. Fedorov, Maxim said, his voice carrying the roughness of too much vodka and cigarettes. I see you've traded up from the older sister. Smart move. This one's much easier on the eyes. Roman's hand tightened on my waist, a warning. Maxim, I wasn't aware you'd been released. 6 months ago, good behavior. Maxim's gaze slid to me, assessing and dismissive in equal measure. You must be Polina. I knew your father back in the day, before he decided he was too good for his old friends. There was history there, dark and complicated, that I didn't understand. But I felt Roman's tension, felt the danger crackling in the air between the 2 men. It's been interesting catching up, Roman said, his voice deceptively mild. But we were just leaving. So soon? Maxim's smile widened. I was hoping to discuss some business opportunities. Now that I'm back in circulation, I'm looking to re-establish old connections. I'm not interested. Not even if it concerns your lovely wife? Maxim leaned closer, voice dropping. I've been hearing things, Fedorov. Whispers about this convenient marriage, about contracts and arrangements. Makes a man wonder what you're really trying to protect. The shift in Roman was instantaneous. One moment he was composed, controlled. The next, he had Maxim backed against a column, his forearm across the older man's throat with surgical precision. If you threaten my wife again, Roman said, his voice arctic, you'll discover that prisons have nothing on what I can do to make a man disappear. Maxim wheezed, his face reddening, but Roman didn't let up. I watched, frozen as the man I'd been sharing breakfast with, who'd been leaving me books and making me dinner, revealed the ruthlessness that had built his empire. Roman. My hand on his arm was light, barely there. He's not worth it. For a moment I thought he wouldn't listen. Then, slowly, he released Maxim, who slumped against the column, gasping. Stay away from what's mine, Roman said quietly, then took my hand and led me away, leaving Maxim to recover his breath and his dignity. In the car ride home, Roman was silent, staring out the window with his jaw clenched. I could feel the tension radiating from him, could see his hands flexing as if he was restraining himself from going back and finishing what he'd started. I'm sorry, he said finally, his voice rough. You shouldn't have seen that. Why? Because it reminds me that you're dangerous. Because it reminds you that you married a monster. I turned to face him fully. You're not a monster, Roman. Monsters don't make breakfast. They don't leave books for people to find. They don't learn your coffee preference and have it waiting every morning. Monsters can do those things, he insisted. It doesn't make the violence less real. No, I agreed, but it makes you more complex than just the violence. I reached for his hand, which was still clenched into a fist. He threatened me. You protected me. I'm not going to condemn you for that. His fingers slowly uncurled, accepting my touch. He was testing me, seeing if there were cracks in my armor, vulnerabilities to exploit. And I showed him exactly how vulnerable I am. His gray eyes met mine, intense and unguarded. Because anyone who threatens you becomes my enemy, contract marriage or not. That's a weakness, Polina. In my world, it's the kind of weakness that gets people killed. My breath caught at the implication that I had become more than just a contractual obligation, that somewhere in the past 6 months, I had become someone worth protecting at any cost. Then I guess we're both vulnerable, I said quietly. Because I'd defend you too, if it came to it. The car pulled up to our building, but neither of us moved to exit. Instead, we sat in the leather interior, hands still linked, looking at each other with a growing awareness that our carefully maintained boundaries had already been breached. This wasn't part of the contract, Roman said, his voice barely above a whisper. No, I agreed. It wasn't. We still have 18 months left. I know. And at the end, we don't have to decide the end right now, I interrupted. Can we just see what happens? Roman raised our joined hands, pressing a kiss to my knuckles with surprising tenderness. Yes, we can see what happens. As we rode the elevator up to the penthouse, I realized that somewhere between breakfast conversations and terrace wine and books left on counters, I had stopped thinking of this as a contract. I had started thinking of it as a marriage. And from the way Roman was looking at me, I suspected he was thinking the same thing. 8 months into our arrangement, I came home from the museum to find Roman in an argument with Kirill in the study. Their voices carried through the slightly open door, tense and sharp in a way I'd never heard before. "She's your wife, not a pawn," Kirill was saying, his usual composure frayed. "You can't seriously be considering—" "I'm not considering anything," Roman interrupted. "I'm telling you it's not happening. Find another solution." "There is no other solution. The Sokolov Alliance requires—" "I don't care what it requires." Roman's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "Polina is off limits. Completely, permanently, non-negotiably off limits. I don't care if it costs me the entire Eastern European market." I shouldn't have been listening. Should have retreated to my wing, given them privacy. But something in the way Roman said my name, fierce and protective, rooted me to the spot. "You're in love with her," Kirill said, and it wasn't a question. The silence that followed was deafening. "That wasn't supposed to happen," Roman said finally, his voice raw with something that sounded like defeat. "It was a contract. 2 years, clean exit, no complications." "When did life ever go according to contract?" Kirill's voice softened. "Roman, this isn't a weakness. It's the most human thing you've done in 15 years. It's a liability. Maxime already sensed it. If others discover I actually care about her, she becomes a target. Every enemy I've made will see her as a way to get to me. So what's your plan? Pretend you don't care? Push her away?" Kirill sighed. "She's not stupid, Roman. She knows. She suspects. That's different from knowing." A pause. "We have 10 months left on the contract. After that, she's free. She gets her settlement, her independence, her life back. That was always the deal. And you? What do you get?" "I get the knowledge that she's safe, that she got out of my world before it destroyed her." I had heard enough. More than enough. I backed away from the door silently, retreating to my wing with my heart hammering against my ribs. Roman was in love with me, and he was planning to let me go anyway. I avoided him for 3 days, citing work at the museum and late cataloging projects that didn't actually exist. Roman didn't push, didn't question, just sent me brief texts checking that I was safe and had eaten. The care in those simple messages made everything worse. On the 4th day, I came home to find him in the kitchen at 7 p.m., an unusual time for him to be home. He was making dinner, pasta, from the smell of it, with wine already poured. "You've been avoiding me," he said without preamble as I set down my bag. "I've been busy." "You've been avoiding me," he repeated, turning from the stove to face me. "Polina, if I did something wrong, if I made you uncomfortable—" "I heard your conversation with Kirill." The words burst out before I could stop them. 4 days ago, about the Sokolov Alliance, about me being off limits, about... I faltered. Roman went very still. "About me being in love with you." Hearing him say it out loud stole my breath. "Yes." He turned back to the stove, adding sauce to pasta with mechanical precision. "Then you also heard that I'm planning to honor our contract. 2 years, clean exit. That hasn't changed." "Why not?" "Because that was the deal." His voice was controlled, careful. "You agreed to this arrangement with the understanding that it was temporary. I won't trap you in my world just because I caught feelings I wasn't supposed to have." "What if I caught them too?" The question escaped before I could think better of it. Roman's hand stilled on the spatula. "What?" "What if somewhere between breakfast conversations and books on the counter and you threatening men who disrespected me, I stopped thinking of this as a contract?" I moved closer, forcing him to look at me. "What if I started thinking of you as Roman, my husband, instead of Roman Fedorov, the dangerous man I married for convenience?" His gray eyes searched mine, looking for deception or obligation or pity. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying The words caught in my throat, terrifying and true. I'm saying I love you too, and I don't want to leave in 10 months. For a moment, he simply stared at me. Then he turned off the stove, crossed to me in 2 strides, and pulled me into his arms with a desperation that took my breath away. Say it again, he demanded, his voice rough against my hair. I love you. The words were easier the second time. I love your stupid early morning coffee routine and your terrible jokes about Russian literature and the way you leave me books like love letters. I love that you're dangerous and gentle in equal measure. I love... His mouth found mine, cutting off the litany. The kiss was nothing like the chaste press of lips at our wedding ceremony. This was hungry, desperate, the breaking of every careful boundary we'd maintained for 8 months. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Roman rested his forehead against mine. I love you, he said, like a confession. I have for months. Maybe since that first conversation in the library, if I'm honest. You saw me, Polina. Really saw me. I couldn't not fall in love with you. Then why were you planning to let me go? Because I'm selfish enough to want you, but not selfish enough to trap you. His hands framed my face, thumbs stroking my cheekbones. My world is dangerous. The life I lead. It's violent, morally gray, full of enemies and consequences. I wanted to give you the choice to walk away from it. And if I choose to stay, then I will spend every day making sure you never regret it. His kiss was softer this time, tender. I will protect you with everything I have. I will love you with everything I am. And I will thank whatever force in the universe put you in that library the night I needed to be seen. I laughed against his mouth, giddy with relief and joy, and the terrifying exhilaration of being fully, completely seen. The universe or Tolstoy? Both. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face from coldly handsome to breathtaking. Definitely both. We didn't make it to dinner that night. Instead, we sat on the kitchen floor, backs against the cabinets, eating pasta straight from the pot, and drinking wine from the bottle like teenagers rather than adults playing at marriage. What happens now? I asked, my head on his shoulder. Do we renegotiate the contract? We burn the contract, Roman said firmly. No more expiration date. No more pretending this is temporary. If you stay because you want to, not because of legal obligations. And if I decide to leave? His arms tightened around me almost imperceptibly. Then I let you go, because I love you too much to cage you. He paused. But I will absolutely try to convince you to stay first. Noted. I tilted my head to look up at him. For the record, I'm not planning to leave, but I do have conditions. His eyebrow arched. Of course you do. I want a real marriage, not the business arrangement, not the separate wings and polite cohabitation. I want to fall asleep next to you and wake up next to you and fight about whose turn it is to make coffee. That's not a condition. That's a gift. His lips found my temple. What else? I want to know about your business. Not the violent parts, I don't need those details. But I want to understand what you do, who you are in that world. No more protection through ignorance. This time he hesitated. Polina, I'm not asking to be involved. I'm asking to know. There's a difference. I twisted to face him fully. You can't protect me from what I don't understand. And I can't really love you if I'm pretending half of who you are doesn't exist. It will change how you see me. Everything changes how we see people. That's called being in a relationship. I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. I know you're dangerous. I know you do things that would terrify most people. I'm choosing to love you anyway, but I need you to trust me enough to let me choose with full knowledge." Roman was quiet for a long moment, his thumb stroking over my knuckles. "All right. Tomorrow I'll introduce you to Kirill properly. He can explain the business operations, the legal and the less legal, and then you can decide if you still want to stay." "I'll still want to stay." "You sound certain." "I am." I squeezed his hand, because I've already seen the worst of you. Or what you think is the worst of you. And I'm still here. Whatever else there is, we'll handle it together. His kiss this time was achingly soft. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." I smiled against his mouth. "Lucky for you, I don't care about what you deserve. I care about who you are when you think no one's looking. And that man, he's worth staying for." We stayed on the kitchen floor until the sky outside the windows began to lighten, talking about everything and nothing, making promises we intended to keep, and plans we knew might change. And when Roman finally led me to his bedroom, our bedroom now, and held me through what remained of the night, I felt the last pieces of my carefully constructed walls crumble. I had agreed to this contract to escape my family's shadow, to claim my own life and freedom. Instead, I'd found something better, a man who saw me completely and loved me anyway. A partnership built on honesty rather than performance. A future that was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. As I drifted toward sleep in Roman's arms, I thought about the invisible girl I'd been just 8 months ago. The one who had accepted a contract marriage because she was tired of being overlooked. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who had been truly seen, truly chosen, truly loved. And she was never going back to the shadows again. 2 weeks after Roman and I had burned our contract, literally in the fireplace, with champagne and a sense of reckless joy, I was deep in the museum archives when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up on the 4th ring. "Is this Polina Fedorova?" A woman's voice, professional and crisp. "Speaking. My name is Detective Karina Sokolova. I'm investigating a series of financial crimes that may involve your husband. I was hoping you might have time to answer a few questions." My blood went cold. "I don't think that's appropriate without a lawyer present." "I'm not accusing you of anything, Mrs. Fedorova. I just thought you might want to know that your husband is under investigation for money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. If you have any information that could help us—" "I don't." I kept my voice steady through sheer force of will. "And I won't be answering questions without legal counsel. Goodbye, Detective." I hung up, hands shaking, and immediately called Roman. He answered on the 1st ring. "Polina, what's wrong?" "A detective just called me. Sokolova. She said you're under investigation for—" My voice cracked. "Roman, what's happening?" A long pause, then quietly, "Where are you?" "The museum. Archives." "Stay there. I'm sending Kirill to pick you up. Don't talk to anyone else. Don't answer your phone if you don't recognize the number, and Polina—" His voice softened. "Don't be afraid. I've got this under control." But when Kirill arrived 30 minutes later, his grim expression suggested Roman's control might be slipping. The penthouse was filled with men I didn't recognize when Kirill escorted me inside. Associates of Roman's, I assumed, all wearing the same hard-eyed expression that suggested they were more bodyguard than businessman. Roman emerged from his study, crossing to me immediately and pulling me into his arms. "You're safe. That's what matters." "What's happening?" I demanded, pulling back to look at him. "Who was that detective? Why did she call me?" "Because she's trying to pressure me through you." Roman's jaw tightened. "Maxime has been talking to the authorities, feeding them information, some true, some fabricated, in exchange for immunity on his own charges. The man from the gala, the one you threatened." "Yes." Roman ran a hand through his hair, the first time I'd seen him visibly agitated. I should have handled him differently. Should have anticipated he'd retaliate. Kirill appeared at Roman's elbow. We need to move her. If Maxim knows she's your actual weakness instead of just a contract wife, he'll escalate. Move me where? I looked between them. Roman, what is he talking about? There's a safe house upstate, Roman said, his hands on my shoulders. Completely secure, off any grid. You'd be there temporarily, just until we resolve this situation. No. The word came out sharper than intended. No, I'm not running. I'm not hiding. Polina, you promised me we'd handle things together. I held his gaze. That means I don't disappear the moment things get difficult. I stay. We deal with this. Together. If you stay, you become a target. Roman's voice was strained. Maxim will use you to hurt me, to force me into a corner. The detective calling you wasn't random. It was a warning. They know about you, about us, about what you mean to me. Good, I said fiercely. Let them know. Let everyone know. I'm not a secret or a liability or something to be protected by hiding me away. I'm your wife. Your actual wife. And I'm not going anywhere. Something shifted in Roman's expression, fear giving way to a kind of awed pride. You're certain? Completely. He pulled me close again, his face buried in my hair. Then we increase security. You don't go anywhere without protection. You follow every precaution Kirill outlines, no exceptions. Agreed? Agreed. What followed were 3 of the most tense weeks of my life. I couldn't go to the museum without a security detail. I couldn't meet Elena for coffee without clearing it with Roman's team first. Every phone call was monitored. Every movement tracked. It should have felt like a cage. Instead, it felt like being valued enough to protect. Roman was relentless in his preparation, calling in favors, shoring up alliances, building a legal defense that Kirill assured me was impenetrable. But I could see the strain on him, the tension in his shoulders, the sleepless nights he tried to hide, the weight of knowing that his enemies had found his weakness. Me. The kidnapping happened on a Thursday. I was leaving the museum, early, at Roman's request, with my usual security detail of 2 men. One moment I was walking toward the car, the next someone was pulling a hood over my head, and strong hands were dragging me backward. I heard shouting, a scuffle, then silence, as something chemical sweet pressed against my face through the fabric. When I woke, I was in a basement somewhere, hands zip-tied to a chair, head throbbing. Maxim sat across from me, his smile cold and satisfied. Mrs. Fedorova, so glad you could join us. Fear tried to claw its way up my throat, but I forced it down. Roman will kill you for this. I'm counting on him trying. Maxim leaned forward. See, I don't actually want to hurt you. I want your husband to make a mistake, to come after you with the kind of violence that will give the authorities everything they need to put him away for life. He won't make a mistake. He will, because he loves you, actually loves you, which makes him weak. Maxim's expression turned contemplative. I have to admit, I didn't think the great Roman Fedorov was capable of genuine emotion. But the way he looked at you that night at the gala, that was real. And real emotions make men do stupid things. My mind raced, trying to remember everything Roman had ever told me about strategy, about thinking 3 moves ahead. If you hurt me, he won't just come after you. He'll come after everyone you've ever cared about. Is that what you want? I'm already a dead man walking, Maxim said with a shrug. Fedorov sees to that the moment I started talking to the authorities. At least this way, I take him down with me. He stood, moving toward the stairs. Someone will bring you food and water. Try to get comfortable. You're going to be here a while, at least until your husband makes his move. They kept me for 3 days. 3 days of darkness and silence, punctuated by meals delivered by people whose faces I never saw. 3 days of fighting panic, of holding on to the certainty that Roman would come, would find me, would make this right. 3 days of wondering if Maxim was right, if loving me would be the mistake that destroyed everything Roman had built. On the 4th day, everything changed. The door to my basement prison opened, but instead of the usual silent food delivery, Kirill appeared, moving with swift efficiency to cut my zip ties. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands surprisingly gentle as he checked me over. "No, I'm fine. Where's Roman?" "Finishing up upstairs." Kirill pulled me to my feet. "Can you walk?" I nodded, letting him guide me up the stairs. The house above was eerily quiet, empty. In the living room, Roman stood with his back to us, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Russian. When he turned and saw me, his expression cracked. He crossed to me in 3 strides, pulling me into his arms with a desperation that made my ribs ache. "You're safe. You're safe." He repeated it like a mantra, his hands framing my face, his eyes searching mine for signs of harm. "Did they hurt you? Touch you? If they laid one hand on you?" "I'm fine," I interrupted, pressing my palm to his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath my fingers. "Roman, I'm okay. What happened? Where's Maxim?" "Gone." Roman's voice was flat, emotionless in a way that should have frightened me but didn't. I dismantled his entire operation in 72 hours, bought out his assets, turned his associates against him, destroyed every source of income and influence he had. He's bankrupt, blacklisted, and currently on a plane to a country with no extradition treaty, never to return. You didn't kill him. No. Roman's hands were still shaking as they cupped my face. Because you once said you love that I don't enjoy violence, that I use it when necessary but find other solutions when possible. So I found another solution. Kirill cleared his throat delicately. The authorities have also mysteriously lost interest in their investigation. Seems their primary witness has disappeared, and most of their evidence came from sources that are now questionable. You bought them off, I realized. I bought everyone who needed buying, buried everyone who needed burying, and made certain that no one will ever use you against me again. Roman's forehead pressed against mine. I swore I would protect you. I failed. You didn't fail. I'm here. I'm safe. You were taken from under my protection, held for 3 days, terrorized. And you got me back, I interrupted firmly. Without bloodshed, without giving Maxim what he wanted, without compromising everything you've built. Roman, you didn't fail. You won. Something in him broke then. He pulled me close, his face buried in my hair, his shoulders shaking with the kind of emotion he never allowed himself to show. I thought I'd lost you, he whispered. Thought I'd made you a target by loving you, by being selfish enough to ask you to stay in my world. I pulled back just enough to look at him. I chose to stay. I choose to keep staying, and I'll choose it every day for the rest of my life if you'll let me. His kiss was fierce, desperate, full of the fear he'd been holding at bay for 3 days. When we finally broke apart, both of us were crying. Him silently, me with great gulping sobs of relief and terror and overwhelming love. Marry me, he said against my lips. Really marry me. Not a contract, not an arrangement. Marry me because you love me and I love you, and I want to spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you know how valuable you are. I laughed through my tears. We're already married. That was a contract. This is a proposal. He kissed me again, softer. Polina Fedorova, will you marry me for real? No expiration date, no conditions, just you and me and whatever life we build together? Yes. The word was easy, effortless. Yes, absolutely yes. Kirill made a discreet coughing sound. Should I give you two a moment? Yes, Roman said, not taking his eyes off me. As Kirill left, Roman gathered me into his arms and carried me out of that house, away from the basement, and the fear and the reminder of how fragile safety could be. I love you, he said, as we drove away in the armored car, his arms wrapped around me like he'd never let go. I love you, and I swear on everything I have that I will spend the rest of my life making you feel safe. I already feel safe, I replied, burrowing into his warmth. Because I'm with you. And despite everything, the kidnapping, the danger, the reminder that loving a man like Roman would never be simple, I meant it. In his arms, even in his dangerous world, I was home. 3 years after Roman had walked into my family's dining room and proposed a contract marriage. We stood in the same private garden where we'd first exchanged vows. But this time, everything was different. This time, there were no business associates in the audience, no calculated guest list, no performance. Just close friends, Kirill and his wife, Elena and her partner, and a handful of people who knew us as Roman and Polina, rather than the Fedorovs. This time, I wore a dress I'd chosen myself, simple ivory silk that moved like water and made me feel like myself rather than someone else's vision of a bride. This time, when Roman lifted my veil and his gray eyes met mine, there was no hesitation, no careful composure, just love. We're doing this again, he murmured, a smile playing at his lips. We're doing it right, I corrected. The first time was a contract. This time is a choice. Best choice I ever made, he said, loud enough for our small gathering to hear, then kissed me before the officiant had even finished the ceremony. The reception was held in the penthouse, which had transformed over 3 years from a showplace of wealth into an actual home. My books lined the shelves alongside Roman's business texts. Photos of us, real candid moments, not posed shots, dotted the surfaces. The kitchen where we'd first started sharing breakfast had become the heart of our life together. To Polina, Kirill toasted, raising his glass. The woman who did the impossible, made Roman Fedorov human again. I was always human, Roman protested. Debatable, Kirill replied with a grin. But Polina brought out the best parts, the ones the rest of us thought were dead. Later, as the party wound down and our guests began to leave, Elena pulled me aside. You know your sister is here, right? She said quietly. Outside the building. She's been there for an hour. My stomach tightened. I hadn't spoken to Natalia in 3 years. Hadn't heard from any of my family since I'd closed the door on them. What does she want? I don't know, but maybe you should find out. I found Roman on the terrace, looking out at the city lights. Natalia's outside. His shoulders tensed. Do you want me to have security send her away? No. I slipped my hand into his. I want to see her, with you beside me. We rode the elevator down together, Roman's presence a solid comfort at my back. Natalia stood on the sidewalk, wrapped in a coat that had seen better days, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Polina. She straightened when she saw us. Can we talk? You have 5 minutes, Roman said, his voice cold. Please, I just need... Natalia's composure cracked. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for how I treated you, for how we all treated you. You were invisible to us until you weren't. And by then it was too late. What do you want, Natalia? I kept my voice neutral, refusing to let old hurts resurface. Nothing. I want nothing. She laughed bitterly. I lost everything, you know. After Roman ended our engagement, I became a cautionary tale. The woman who couldn't keep the great Roman Fedorov. My social circle dried up. My prospects evaporated. I'm working retail now, living in a studio apartment, completely alone. And you thought I'd feel sorry for you? The words came out sharper than intended. No. I thought you deserved to know that you were right. Natalia's eyes glistened. You were right about everything. I did see Roman as a status symbol, as a wallet and a title, and it took losing him to realize I'd never actually seen the man the way you did from the start. She looked at Roman then, really looked at him. You loved her even then, didn't you? When you were engaged to me, you saw something in her that I was too blind to see in my own sister. Roman's hand tightened on mine. I saw someone who treated me like a person instead of a commodity. Someone honest and real in a world of performance. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Natalia said, turning back to me. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that watching you two together, seeing the life you've built, it's what I deserved. To watch from the outside, knowing what I lost by never valuing what I had. Something in me softened, just slightly. I don't wish you ill, Natalia. I never did. I just wish you'd seen me when it mattered. I see you now. Her smile was sad, fragile. For what it's worth, you're glowing. Happy. And that's more than I ever wished for you when we were growing up. I'm sorry it took your success to make me realize my cruelty. She turned to leave, then paused. Congratulations on your marriage. The real one. I hope you know how rare it is. What you two have. As she disappeared into the night, Roman pulled me close. Are you all right? I think so. I leaned into his warmth, watching my sister's retreating figure. She lost everything because she couldn't see value in what she had. I gained everything because someone finally saw value in me. I didn't give you value, Roman corrected softly. I just recognized what was already there. You were never invisible, Polina. You were just surrounded by people too blind to see you. We rode back up to the penthouse, to the party that was winding down, to the life we'd built from a contract that had become so much more. Later, after the last guest had left and we were alone in our bedroom, the master suite we now shared completely, Roman pulled me close. Do you ever regret it? He asked, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. Agreeing to that first contract? Binding yourself to me? Every day, I said, feeling him tense. Then I tilted my head to look at him, smiling. I regret that we wasted 6 months pretending we didn't care. I regret that I let fear keep me from seeing what we could be sooner. But the contract itself? Marrying you? Never. His exhale was relief and joy combined. I love you. I know. I kissed him softly. You've loved me since a library conversation about Tolstoy. You just took a while to admit it. Perceptive as always, it's why you married me. For my perceptiveness, among other things. His hand spanned my waist, pulling me closer. Want me to list them? You could show me instead. His laugh was low, intimate, as my wife wishes. Later, as I drifted toward sleep in Roman's arms, I thought about the invisible girl I'd been. The one who had accepted a contract marriage because she was tired of being overlooked, tired of living in shadows. That girl had made the bravest choice of her life, to step into the light, to be seen, to risk being valued and found worthy. And she'd discovered something better than freedom or independence or escaping her family's shadow. She discovered what it meant to be truly, completely, unconditionally loved. Not for what she could provide or how she could perform, but for exactly who she was. The woman who saw through Roman Fedorov's dangerous reputation to the man underneath. The woman who called him on his pretenses and made him breakfast and refused to hide when things got difficult. The woman who had been invisible for 26 years and then decided to be seen. As I fell asleep, Roman's heartbeat steady beneath my ear. I smiled. Being seen, it turned out, was the only power I'd ever really needed, and I was never going back to the shadows again.